At my only child's wedding, her new husband introduced me to his employer as a worthless bum. He had no idea that the man he was trying to impress was the very person I had mentored into his role decades earlier. The climate control in the Grand Plaza ballroom was set to a crisp chill, yet beads of perspiration dotted my future son-in-law's brow. Chadwick Vance was a man who lived loudly, quickly, and entirely on borrowed funds. He stood at the room's heart, his ivory tuxedo shining under the glittering chandeliers, appearing every bit a storybook prince in a tale he couldn't actually afford. I remained near the service entrance, wearing the one suit I'd held on to, a deep navy ensemble from another era that carried the faint scent of old wood and memories. I watched my daughter, Chloe, radiant in a gown that likely cost more than the first property I ever purchased. She seemed happy, yet her gaze kept darting around anxiously, watching Chadwick, the guests, and then me. I could feel her shame in the hesitant way she brought her friends over to meet her dad. To her and to everyone there, I was just Arthur, the quiet man who lived in a modest home at the edge of the forest, drove an aging pickup, and spent his days tending his garden. Chadwick motioned me over. His gesture wasn't warm. It was a command. He was seated at the prime table, the one for the most crucial people in his orbit. Seated there was a man I knew intimately, though he hadn't laid eyes on me in several years, Mr. Blackwood, the present chief executive of Apex Distribution, the man I had personally trained to lead my enterprise when I chose to step back from the spotlight. "Get over here, Arthur," Chadwick called out, his voice cutting through the soft music. "I want you to meet someone important." I walked over slowly. My joints ached, a reminder of 4 decades spent handling freight before I owned the entire operation. As I neared the table, Chadwick stood and threw a heavy arm over my shoulder. It felt like a chain. He carried the smell of high-priced whiskey and overconfidence. "Mr. Blackwood," Chadwick said, his voice slick with a fake, greasy charm. "This is my father-in-law, Arthur." "He's quite a character." Blackwood glanced up from his meal. His eyes narrowed a fraction behind his wire-framed glasses. He was trying to place my face, but the beard I'd grown and the weight I'd lost since retiring were effective camouflage. Chadwick didn't wait. He squeezed my shoulder hard. "Arthur here is a simple guy. Lives out in the boonies, hasn't had a real job in years, actually. We try to help him out when we can, toss him a few bucks, but honestly, he's a bit of a failure." I told Chloe we had to invite him out of sympathy. "Can you believe he drove a truck here that sounds like it's about to fall apart?" A few people at the table gave uneasy, forced laughs. Chloe, standing a few steps away, looked down at the floor. She didn't speak up for me. She didn't utter a single word. She just let her new partner reduce her, father to a pitiful case to gain, favor with his superior. A cold flame ignited in my chest. It wasn't rage. It was a moment of absolute crystalline understanding. For months, I had felt Chadwick wasn't genuine. I knew he was a regional director at my firm, but his way of life didn't align with his earnings. The luxury apartment, the flashy car, this $200,000 ceremony. He said he was a top producer, a star. Standing there, hearing him ridicule me, I understood he wasn't just dishonest. He was a complete fool. I looked at Blackwood. The CEO had stopped eating. He was staring at me, his fork frozen midway to his mouth. Recognition was dawning in his eyes. He looked at my outdated suit, then at my face, and finally at the signet ring on my right hand, a ring identical to his own. It was the ring I gave to the senior leadership when the company cleared its first billion. "Arthur?" Blackwood murmured, his voice quivering slightly. Chadwick laughed, completely unaware of the shifting atmosphere. "Yeah, that's Arthur. Don't worry, he won't ask you for work. He's too busy watching grass grow on his lawn." I didn't speak. I simply reached up and straightened my tie, forming a specific knot I had taught Blackwood to tie 30 years prior. I looked him directly in the eye and gave a slight, almost invisible nod. It was an order. It was the same look I used to give him across the conference table when it was time to sever a toxic partnership. Blackwood stood up. His chair scraped loudly on the floor. The sound silenced the chatter at the table. He didn't look at Chadwick. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked only at me. And for a moment, I saw the sheer panic of a man realizing he had allowed a Volf into his inner circle. "Mr. Vance," Blackwood said, his voice cold and projecting to the nearby tables. Chadwick grinned, thinking a compliment was coming. "Yes, sir?" "You just referred to this man as a failure," Blackwood stated. "Yeah, just a bit of fun, sir," Chadwick said, waving a dismissive hand. "Keeping things light." "It is not light to me," Blackwood responded. His face was ashen. "This man is not without work, and he is absolutely not a failure. He is the reason you have a position. Or rather, the reason you had a position." The smile melted from Chadwick's face. "What?" "You're terminated, Chadwick," Blackwood said, slicing the air with his hand. "Effective right now? You're terminated for severe misconduct, a profound lack of judgment, and frankly, for being an imbecile." The music seemed to halt. The clinking of cutlery stopped. 300 guests turned to stare at the prime table. Chadwick stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Terminated?" Chadwick stammered. "You can't terminate me. It's my wedding day. I'm your best sales director." "You are a risk," Blackwood spat. "And if you ever speak to this man with anything less than total respect again, I will ensure you never find work in this industry again. Remove yourself from my sight." Blackwood turned to me and gave a slight bow of his head. It was a gesture of deep reverence, a lieutenant acknowledging his commander. I kept my expression neutral. I didn't want to reveal my full identity yet. Not here, not in this way. I wanted Chadwick to stew in his own confusion. Chadwick looked at Blackwood, then at me, his face twisting into a mask of pure fury. He couldn't comprehend what was happening. In his mind, I was the source. I was the jinx. I was the smudge on his perfect ivory tuxedo. Chloe let out a sharp gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. The champagne fluke she was holding slipped and shattered on the stone floor. The sound was sharp and jarring, breaking the room's stunned silence. I looked at Chadwick, whose face was turning a dangerous shade of crimson. I reached out to a passing server, took a glass of red wine from his tray, and took a slow, deliberate sip. "This wine is bitter," I stated calmly, my voice carrying in the quiet. "Much like your character, Chadwick." Chadwick lunged at me, his hands aiming for the collar of my old suit. "You did this?" He screamed, spit flying. "You senile old fool? What did you tell him? You've ruined it all." Security personnel, whom Blackwood must have signaled, stepped in immediately, restraining Chadwick before he could touch me. He struggled in their grip, yelling profanities, blaming me, blaming the universe, blaming anyone but himself. I turned my back on him. I walked to the table, picked up a cloth napkin, and brushed a speck of lint from my sleeve. The wedding was finished. The conflict had just begun, and Chadwick Vance had no clue he had just started a war with the man who owned the entire field of battle. Chadwick didn't just get mad. He came completely undone. The reality of Blackwood's words struck him like a physical blow, but instead of accepting it, his mind rejected it entirely. It was simpler for him to believe the universe had gone insane than to admit his own catastrophic error. He stood there, chest heaving, his eyes flicking back and forth between Blackwood and me with a frantic, wild intensity. "You're joking?" Chadwick laughed, but it was a brittle, hysterical sound that made nearby guests recoil. "This is a test, right, boss? You're testing my loyalty. You want to see if I can handle pressure. Well, I can handle it." "Good one, sir." "You really got me for a second." Blackwood didn't smile. He didn't blink. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Chadwick, with the cold detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. "I am not joking, Mr. Vance. You are terminated. Vacate the premises now, before I have you physically removed." That was the spark that lit the fuse. Chadwick's face twisted from confusion to pure, unadulterated violence. He roared, a sound that was less than human and more bestial, and launched himself across the table. He wasn't aiming for me this time. He was aiming for the man who had just obliterated his future. "You can't do this to me." Chadwick screamed, his hands clawing at the air just inches from Blackwood's neck. "I made you millions. I am the star of this company." The security team, who had been waiting on the periphery, moved with practiced efficiency. Two of them intercepted Chadwick mid-lunge. One grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back, while the other wrapped a thick limb around his torso. Their momentum sent them crashing into a desert table laden with pastries and a decorative ice centerpiece. The sound of shattering glass and collapsing metal echoed through the ballroom like an explosion. Ice cubes skittered across the polished floor. Pastries and cream splattered onto the expensive dresses of the wedding party. The guests screamed. This was no longer a wedding. It was a riot. "Let me go," Chadwick howled, thrashing against the guards. He managed to kick out his expensive dress shoe, connecting with a chair and sending it skidding into the crowd. "Get your hands off me. Do you have any idea who I am?" Chloe was frozen in the middle of the room, her hands pressed over her mouth, watching the man she had just pledged her life to transform into a beast. She looked at me, her eyes begging me to intervene to stop the chaos. But I remained still. I took another sip of the bitter wine. This was a lesson she needed to witness. She needed to see the true man behind the carefully constructed mask. The guards finally managed to pin Chadwick to the floor. His ivory tuxedo was now stained with chocolate and cream, looking grotesque. His hair was a mess, falling over his wild eyes. He was panting, spitting curses at the ceiling, his dignity entirely stripped away. "Get him up," Blackwood ordered, brushing a speck of cream from his jacket. "And remove him from my sight." As the guards hauled Chadwick to his feet, the room's atmosphere shifted from shock to condemnation. The guests whispered, pointed, recorded everything on their phones. The illusion of the perfect, powerful couple had vanished, leaving only a violent, jobless man and his horrified bride. Chadwick shook the guards off as soon as he was standing, though they stayed close, ready to grab him again. He smoothed his jacket with trembling hands, his chest heaving. He looked around the room, seeing the cameras, the judgmental stares, the total ruin of his grand day. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame, because a man like him can never look inward. His eyes locked onto me. "This is your fault," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. "You did this. You and your bad juju. You walked in here looking like a vagrant and you poisoned everything." He turned to Chloe, who was now weeping quietly. "And you let him come. I told you not to invite him. I told you he was nothing but a problem. Look what he's done. He turned my boss against me. He probably lied to him. He probably told him some sob story to make me look terrible." Chloe shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Chadwick, stop." He didn't say a word. "You were the one who insulted him." "Shut up," Chadwick snapped, his voice cracking. "You're supposed to be on my side. I gave you everything. I gave you this wedding. I gave you this life. And you let your deadbeat father destroy it all." He was unraveling, spewing venom in every direction. He called me a curse. He called me a leech. He claimed I had been jealous of his success and had orchestrated this entire scene to humiliate him. It was delusional, but he believed it. He had to believe it to support the crushing weight of his own ego. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open. A man in a sharp black suit entered, followed by two assistants holding tablets. It was the venue manager. He did not look pleased. He surveyed the overturned table, the smashed ice sculpture, the food on the floor, and the guests huddled in corners. "Mr. Vance," the manager said, his voice slicing through Chadwick's tirade, "we have a significant issue." Chadwick spun around, his face flushed and sweaty. "What now? Can't you see I'm dealing with something?" "We have received numerous complaints from other events about the disturbance," the manager stated calmly. "Furthermore, there has been substantial damage to venue property, and violent behavior is a direct breach of your rental agreement. I am shutting this event down immediately." "Shutting it down?" Chadwick laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "You can't shut it down. I paid a small fortune for this." "Actually," the manager corrected, consulting his tablet, "you paid a deposit. The remaining balance of $175. $100,000 was due at the event's conclusion. However, given the breach of contract and the damages I am witnessing, I am invoking the immediate payment clause. I require the full balance settled right now, or I will be contacting the authorities to press charges for property destruction and theft of services. $175,000. The number hung in the air. The guests fell silent again. The music had long stopped. The only sounds were the hum of the climate control and Chloe's soft weeping. 175,000, Chadwick repeated. He looked at the manager, then at the guards, then at the exit. He realized he was trapped. He puffed out his chest, trying to regain some semblance of control. Fine. I'll pay your ridiculous bill, and then I'm going to sue you for ruining my wedding. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a sleek titanium wallet. He extracted a black credit card with a flourish, holding it up like a trophy. Here, take it. Put it all on this and add a tip for yourself so you can afford a personality transplant. The manager took the card without a word. He signaled to one of his assistants, who brought over a mobile card reader. The manager inserted the card. He typed in the amount, $175,000. He handed the device to Chadwick to enter his PIN. Chadwick punched the numbers in aggressively, staring at me the whole time with a look of pure hatred. "Watch this, old man," he sneered. "This is what real wealth looks like." The machine beeped. A harsh, flat sound. Transaction declined. The manager looked at the screen, then at Chadwick. "I'm sorry, sir." The card was declined. "Run it again," Chadwick snapped. "It's an infinite card. It has no ceiling." The manager tried again. Beep. Declined. Chadwick's face went pale. He snatched the wallet back and pulled out another card. "Try this one." Beep. Declined. A third card. Beep. Declined. Chadwick was sweating profusely now. He was tapping the machine, shaking it as if he could force the funds to appear. "There must be a mistake. The system is down. Call the bank." "There is no mistake, sir," the manager said, his voice dropping an octave. "The cards are maxed out or frozen? Do you have another method of payment?" Chadwick looked at Chloe. "Do you have your card?" Chloe shook her head. "You told me to leave my clutch in the suite." "I don't have anything on me." Chadwick looked around the room. His friends were studding the floor. His parents were conspicuously absent. He was alone, completely and utterly alone, with a $175,000 debt hanging over his head and the threat of criminal charges closing in. Then his eyes landed on me again. He stared, and a warped idea formed in his desperate mind. He walked over to me, invading my personal space, his breath hot and reeking of panic. "You," he hissed. "You pay it." I looked at him calmly. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me," Chadwick shouted, his voice echoing. "This is your fault. You got me fired. You caused this mess. You're the father of the bride. It's customary for the father to pay. So pay it." He pointed at my old suit, my worn shoes. "I know you have some cash stashed away in a coffee can somewhere. Dig it out. Write a check. Do whatever you have to do. But you are not leaving this room until you fix the disaster you created." He grabbed my lapel again, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "Pay the bill, old man, or I swear to God, I will make sure you never see your daughter again." I reached into the inner pocket of my worn wool jacket. The movement was slow and deliberate, drawing the gaze of everyone present. Chadwick stopped breathing, his eyes locked onto my hand, his pupils dilated with a mixture of greed and sudden hope. He thought he had won. He thought his intimidation had worked and that the quiet old man was about to produce a checkbook to salvage the day. I saw the tension leave Chloe's shoulders. She let out a shaky breath, believing her father was going to resolve the catastrophe she had married into. She looked at me with gratitude, but underneath it I saw the expectation. She expected me to pay because I had always been the one to pay. I withdrew a single cream-colored envelope. It was slightly bent at the corners. I held it out to Chadwick. "Take it," I said softly. Chadwick snatched it from my hand like a starved animal grabbing meat. He didn't say thank you. He tore the flap open, his fingers shaking, searching for the check that would clear his debt and restore his ego. He pulled out the contents. It wasn't a check. It wasn't currency. It was a greeting card. A simple card with a picture of a lone oak tree on the front. Chadwick stared at it. He flipped it over. He shook the envelope upside down, hoping something else would fall out. Nothing did. He opened the card and read the handwritten message inside. I had written it that morning while sipping my tea. True strength is found in standing on your own. Congratulations on beginning your journey. Chadwick looked up at me, his face contorted in disbelief. Is this a joke? He spat, throwing the card onto the floor. Is this some kind of pathetic joke? One need $175,000, and you give me a card from a drugstore. It is not a joke, I replied, my voice steady. It is a lesson. You claim to be a self-made man, Chadwick. You called me a failure. A failure cannot help a winner. You are on your own. Chloe rushed forward, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. Daddy, please. You can't do this. The manager is going to call the police. They're going to arrest him. Please just pay it. I know you have savings. I know you have the money from Grandma's estate. Just give it to him. Do it for me. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman I had raised to be strong, to be self-reliant, to be compassionate. And all I saw was a stranger willing to drain her father dry to protect, a man who had just publicly shamed him. I have paid enough, Chloe, I said, my voice hardening. She shook her head. You haven't paid anything. You just gave us a card? I haven't paid anything, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Let me refresh your memory, daughter. Who do you think paid off the loan on your convertible last year when Chadwick forgot to make the payments for 5 months? It wasn't the bank feeling generous. It was me. Chloe froze. Her eyes went wide. Who do you think provided the down payment for that penthouse you two boast about owning? I continued, my voice rising just enough to carry over the crowd's whispers. You told everyone it was Chadwick's annual bonus. Chadwick told everyone he was a property genius, but I wrote that check. I sent it anonymously to the escrow agent so you wouldn't lose the deal. Chadwick stepped back, looking like he'd been struck. He knew, he had always suspected, but he had never wanted to admit that his luxurious life was being funded by the man he loathed. And the gambling debt, I added, looking directly at Chadwick. The $60,000 you ran up on online betting sites last holiday season. You told Chloe you won big at a charity auction to pay it back. There was no auction. I paid the bookmaker because I didn't want men with crowbars showing up at my daughter's home. I stepped closer to them. I have spent over $250,000 in the last 3 years cleaning up your disasters. I did it from the shadows because I wanted you to have your pride. I wanted you to have a chance to build your own life. But today you showed me that you don't want pride. You want a servant. You want a wallet. Chloe was crying openly now, her makeup running down her face. Daddy, stop. Please stop. Everyone is listening. You're humiliating us. I am not humiliating you, I said coldly. You humiliated yourselves. You introduced me as a burden. You introduced me as a deadbeat. Well, congratulations. The burden is gone, and so is the bank. Chadwick wiped the sweat from his face, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered rat. He saw the security guards moving closer. He saw the manager tapping his watch. He needed a lifeline, and he realized he had one final card to play. Chloe, he barked. Use the emergency card. The one your dad gave you for real emergencies. It has a huge limit. Use it? Chloe looked at me, then at Chadwick. She hesitated. Do it, Chadwick screamed. Or I'm going to jail. Chloe reached into her small purse. She pulled out a slender platinum credit card. It was a supplementary card linked to one of my private accounts. I had given it to her years ago, telling her it was for genuine, life-threatening situations only. She had never used it. Until now. She walked toward the manager, her hand trembling. Here, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Try this one. I didn't move to stop her. I didn't grab her hand. I simply reached into the pocket of my trousers and pulled out my phone. It wasn't a modern smartphone. It was an old, rugged device I used for secure communications. It looked like a relic. Chadwick saw the phone and let out a derisive laugh. Look at that. He's calling for help on a fossil. I didn't look at him. I dialed a short code. #0. It was a direct command to my banking system, a kill switch I had programmed for this specific account. I pressed send. The manager took Chloe's card. He swiped it. He waited. I watched the machine. I watched the red light blink. Declined, the manager said. Chloe gasped. That's impossible. Daddy said it had $75,000 available. Try it again. The manager swiped it again. Declined, card invalid. Please confiscate. The manager looked at Chloe. I'm sorry, ma'am. This account has been frozen, and the bank has instructed me to retain the card. He slipped the piece of plastic into his pocket. Chloe turned to me, her face a mask of betrayal. Daddy, what did you do? I put the brick phone back in my pocket. I cut you off, Chloe, I said. You chose him. You chose the man who mocks your father. You chose the man who spends money he doesn't have. You chose the man who values appearances over integrity, so you can deal with the consequences together. That is what partnership is. Chadwick roared in frustration and tried to rush me again, but the security guards were ready. They slammed him against the wall, handcuffing him before he could take 2 steps. This is assault! Chadwick screamed as they dragged him toward the door. I'll sue you. I'll sue this hotel. I'll sue everyone. The manager signaled to his staff. Call the police and prepare the invoice for our legal team. I adjusted my jacket. I looked at Blackwood, who was watching the scene with grim satisfaction. He nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement that justice had been served. I walked past Chloe. She tried to grab my hand, but I stepped out of reach. Daddy, wait, she sobbed. How are we going to get home? They took our car keys. Take the train, I said without breaking stride. It builds resilience. I walked out of the ballroom, the heavy doors swinging shut behind me, cutting off the sound of Chadwick's screaming and my daughter's crying. I walked through the lobby and out into the cool night. My old pickup truck was waiting for me in the valet line, parked right between the Porsches and the Jaguars. The valet looked at me, holding my keys. Ready to go, sir? He asked. I took the keys and climbed into the cab. The engine roared to life with a rough, rumbling sound that Chadwick despised. I smiled. It was the sound of freedom. I drove away from the hotel, leaving the chaos in my rearview mirror, knowing that the most difficult part was still to come. They would come for me. They would come for my land. And I would be ready. 3 days passed in a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a massive storm. I spent those days on my porch, carving a piece of maple wood and watching the road. I knew Chadwick wasn't finished. A man like him, stripped of his ego and his income, doesn't just fade away. He detonates. I just didn't know when the explosion would happen. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. A black luxury SUV tore up my gravel driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled over my clean truck. They didn't park politely. They skidded to a halt inches from my front steps. Chadwick jumped out of the driver's seat. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. His expensive shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot, and he moved with the jerky, frantic energy of an addict searching for a fix. Chloe climbed out of the passenger side. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes fixed on the ground. Chadwick didn't knock. He kicked the front door open. The old wood groaned and splintered near the lock, the sound echoing through the small house like a gunshot. He stormed into my living room, bringing the smell of stale coffee and raw desperation with him. You think you're clever, old man? He screamed, his voice cracking. You think you can ruin my life and just sit here whittling sticks? I stood up slowly from my armchair, my hand tightening around the handle of my carving knife. Get out of my home, Chadwick. This isn't a home, he spat, spinning around. It's a shack. It's a rat's nest. I don't know how Chloe survived in this squalor. He grabbed a ceramic bowl from the mantel. It was a simple, earthy thing, imperfect and hand-thrown. My wife, Eleanor, had made it with her own hands 40 years ago in a pottery class we took together. It was the first thing she ever created. "Don't touch that," I warned, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Chadwick looked me in the eye and smashed the bowl against the floor. The ceramic shattered into 100 pieces. He kicked the shards across the room, grinding the memory of my wife into the dust. "Oops," he sneered. He then grabbed a framed photograph from the side table. It was the last picture taken of Eleanor before her illness took her. She was smiling, sitting in her garden, wearing her favorite wide-brimmed hat. "And this trash?" Chadwick yelled. "It belongs in the garbage." He threw the photo out the open door. It landed face down in the dirt of the front yard. My heart hammered against my ribs with a violence I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to tackle him. I wanted to break him. But I stayed rooted to the spot. Physical force was his language. If I fought him on his terms, he would win the story. I had to defeat him my way. Chadwick reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick legal envelope. He slammed it onto my small dining table with enough force to make the salt and pepper shakers jump. "Read it," he commanded. I didn't move. "Tell me what it is." "It's a lawsuit," Chadwick announced, puffing out his chest. "Defamation, loss of income, emotional distress, malicious interference with a business contract. I'm suing you, Arthur. I'm suing you for $5 million. I looked at the envelope, then at him. $5 million, I repeated calmly. "You don't have $5, Chadwick." "I will when the court is done with you," he shouted. "You told lies to Blackwood. You slandered me. You destroyed my reputation in this city. I can't get an interview. No one will hire me. You took everything from me, so now I'm going to take everything from you." I looked at Chloe. She was standing by the door, refusing to look at the broken bowl or the photo in the dirt. She was trembling. "Chloe," I said softly, "is this what you want?" She didn't answer. She just wrapped her arms around herself as if she were freezing. "Don't talk to her," Chadwick barked, stepping between us. "She's on my side. We're a team, and we know you don't have $5 million liquid. We know you're broke, but you have one thing." He pulled another document from his pocket. It was crumpled and stained. He smoothed it out on the table next to the lawsuit. "This land," he said, waving his hand around the room. "It's the only asset you have. I checked the county records. You own it outright. It's a dump, and this house should be condemned, but developers are buying up properties along the new highway route." He pointed a shaking finger at the paper. It was a quit-claim deed. "Sign it," he demanded. "Transfer the property to me. I can flip it fast. It won't cover the $5 million, but it'll get me some cash. It'll get the collectors off my back and pay for a lawyer to go after Blackwood." I walked over to the table and looked down at the deed. He wanted my home. He wanted the place where I had raised my daughter, the place where I had cared for my wife, the place where I had found peace away from the noise of the corporate world. "You want me to sell my home to pay for your gambling debts?" I asked. "It's not a home," Chadwick screamed, his face turning red. "It's a patch of dirt with a roof. Look at it, it's pathetic. Just like you. Sign the paper, Arthur. It's probably worth $75,000 if we're lucky. That's just enough to keep my bones intact for another week." I let out a short, dry laugh. It rattled in my chest. "You think this land is worth $75,000? I asked. "It's dirt and trees," he said dismissively. "What else could it be worth?" I picked up the deed and looked at the legal description. He hadn't even read it properly. He just saw a house and a driveway. "Chadwick," I said, my voice steady and cold, "you see a shack and a garden. You see what's in front of your face. But you didn't look at the survey." I stepped closer to him, forcing him to look up at me. "This house sits on 125 acres of land," I revealed. "I bought the surrounding parcels 40 years ago when everyone said the city would never expand this far. I own the timber rights. I own the mineral rights. And last year, the city council rezoned this entire sector for high-density commercial development." Chadwick's eyes bulged. His mouth fell open. "This land isn't worth 75,000, I said. "It's appraised at $15 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Chadwick stared at me and then looked around the house with a new expression. The disgust was gone, replaced instantly by a ravenous, desperate greed. He looked like a starved coyote that had just stumbled upon a feast. 15 million, he whispered. You're sitting on 15 million and you live like this? You drive that junk truck and wear these rags when you have 15 million in the ground. I live like this because I choose to, I said. Because my memories are here. Because my wife is buried under the willow tree out back. You see a price tag, Chadwick? I see a sanctuary. And I am not selling a single square inch of it to save a parasite like you. Chadwick's shock morphed back into rage, but this time it was fueled by envy. He snatched a pen from his pocket and shoved it into my chest. Sign it, he hissed. Sign it right now? You owe us. You owe Chloe. You've been hoarding this wealth while we suffer. It's selfish. It's evil. Sign the paper, old man, or I swear I will burn this place to the ground with you in it. No, I said. Chadwick threw the pen across the room. It bounced off the wall and landed in the fireplace. He paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. He looked at the lawsuit, then at the deed, then at me. He realized he couldn't force me physically, not without crossing a line he wasn't ready for yet. But his eyes lit up with a malicious idea. He pulled out his phone. Fine, you want to play hardball. You want to keep your precious sanctuary. Let's see how much you love it when it's condemned. He dialed a number, putting it on speaker so I could hear the ringing tone. Building and Safety Department, a voice answered. Yes, I want to report a severe code violation, Chadwick said, his voice smoothing into a fake tone of concern. I'm at 808 Forest Lane. The structure is unstable. The foundation is crumbling, and there is exposed electrical wiring throughout the house. It's a fire hazard. I'm very worried it's going to collapse on the elderly occupant. He looked at me and winked. Yes, I'm a concerned family member, he continued. Please send an inspector immediately. It needs to be condemned. It needs to be demolished for public safety reasons. He hung up the phone and smiled at me, a cruel, twisted grin that showed all his teeth. You won't sell it. Fine, then I'll have the city tear it down. Let's see how much your 15 million land is worth when your house is a pile of rubble. We're leaving, Chloe. He grabbed my daughter by the arm and dragged her toward the door. Enjoy your last night in your shack, old man, he called out over his shoulder. The bulldozers are coming. The heavy tires of the municipal truck crunched on the gravel, signaling the arrival of the executioner Chadwick had summoned. I watched from my rocking chair as the white pickup truck stopped next to Chadwick's. Black SUV, the contrast was stark. The city vehicle was dusty and utilitarian. Chadwick's car screamed of leased luxury and debt. The building inspector stepped out. He was a man who carried his authority like a weapon. He slammed the truck door shut and adjusted his belt. His eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, scanned the property. He marched toward the porch, ignoring the beautiful morning light filtering through the trees, focused entirely on the clipboard in his hand. Chadwick stepped forward to greet him, his face lighting up with vindictive glee. Over here, officer, this is the property. As I told you on the phone, it's a hazard. The wiring is ancient and the foundation is basically sand. I'm terrified it's going to collapse on my father-in-law. He pointed at me with a gesture that was half accusation, half mockery. Look at him. He sits there because he's probably afraid to move in case the floor gives way. We need an emergency condemnation order. We need it bulldozed before someone gets hurt. The inspector stopped at the bottom of the steps. He looked at the siding of the house. He kicked a wooden support beam with his steel-toed boot. The wood held firm, solid as the day I placed it, but the inspector made a show of shaking, his head inscribbling, something ominous on his yellow form. I'm going to need to see the interior, the inspector grunted, his voice rough. But from the exterior, I can already see multiple major code violations. We're likely looking at an immediate vacate order. Chadwick turned to me, his smile stretching so wide it looked painful. Did you hear that, Arthur? An immediate vacate order. That means you get out now. The bulldozers are coming, just like I promised. You should have signed the deed when you had the chance. Now you lose the land and the house. Chloe stood by the car, her hands covering her face. She was watching her childhood home being sentenced to death, and she didn't say a word to stop it. The inspector walked up the steps. He finally took off his sunglasses to get a better look at the door frame. He looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked him dead in the eye. Name of owner, the inspector barked, pen hovering over the paper. Arthur Finch, I said. The inspector's hand froze. He looked up from the clipboard. He squinted, leaning in closer, studying my face. He looked at the scar above my eyebrow. He looked at the way I held my hands. The aggression drained out of his posture like water from a cracked cup. His jaw went slack. Mr. Finch, he whispered. Mr. Arthur Finch? That's me, I replied calmly. The inspector lowered the clipboard slowly. A look of absolute recognition and deep respect washed over his face. He took a step back, almost stumbling. I didn't know you lived here, sir, he said, his voice changing completely. It was no longer the voice of a bully. It was the voice of a man speaking to a legend. I haven't seen you since the dedication of the riverfront park. My kids play on that playground every weekend. I nodded slowly. That's good to hear, David. I remember you. You were the lead engineer on the drainage project. You finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Chadwick let out a sound of pure confusion. He stepped between us, waving his hands. What's going on? Why are you talking to him like that? He's a code violator. He's living in a shack. Condemn it. David turned on Chadwick. The look he gave my son-in-law was withering. He looked at Chadwick like he was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Who is this clown, Mr. Finch? David asked me. My son-in-law, I said. He seems to think he's a building inspector today. David laughed a short, sharp bark. He looked at Chadwick. Son, you have no idea who you're talking to. Mr. Finch didn't just build this house. He built half the critical infrastructure in this county. He privately funded the new children's hospital wing. He paid for the Central Library's restoration. If he says this house is safe, then it's the safest building in the state. Chadwick's face went purple. That's a lie. He's broke. He's unemployed. He bribed you. I'll report you. David stepped into Chadwick's personal space. He was a head taller and 50 pounds heavier. Excuse me? Are you accusing a city official of corruption? Because I can write you a citation right now for filing a false report. It's a crime to waste municipal resources on a personal vendetta. Do you want me to call the sheriff? Chadwick backed away, his hands raising in surrender. No, I thought. You thought wrong? David snapped. He tore the yellow citation sheet off his clipboard. He crumpled it into a ball and tossed it onto the ground at Chadwick's feet. Get off this property, and if I see your name on my dispatch log again, I'll have you arrested for harassment. David turned back to me and tipped his hard hat. Sorry for the disturbance, Mr. Finch. You have a good day. Thank you, David, I said. The inspector got back in his truck and drove away. Chadwick stood there, staring at the crumpled paper in the dirt. He was shaking. He had tried to use the law as a weapon, and it had turned in his hand. He looked at me. And for a second I saw fear, but then the fear turned into something darker, something sharper. He turned slowly toward Chloe. She was staring at me with wide eyes, processing what the inspector had said. Hospital wings, libraries, infrastructure. Did you hear that, Chloe? Chadwick said, his voice soft and poisonous. Chloe blinked. Hear what? The inspector, Chadwick said, walking over to her. He said your dad funded the hospital. He said he paid for the library. Do you know how much that costs? That's millions of dollars, Chloe, millions. He grabbed her shoulders and spun her to face me. He isn't broke, Chloe. He's been lying to you. He's been hoarding millions of dollars while we suffer. He watched us get evicted. He watched me lose my job. And he sat here on his piles of cash and did nothing. Chloe looked at me. Her expression shifted. The confusion melted away, replaced by a deep, cold suspicion. Dad, she whispered. Is it true? Do you have money? I didn't answer. Answer me, she screamed. Do you have millions of dollars? Yes, I said. Chloe recoiled as if I had slapped her. You have millions and you let us live like this? You let us struggle? I let you live your life, I said. No, you lied to me, she cried. You are hiding money from your own family. Chadwick was right. You don't love us. You just love your money. She grabbed Chadwick's hand. Let's go. I can't stand to look at him. Chadwick smirked at me as he led her to the car. He hadn't destroyed my house, but he had destroyed something far more important. He had turned my daughter against me. And as they drove away, I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a much dirtier war. The dust from their departure had barely settled when I began preparing for their return. I knew they wouldn't stay away. Greed is a powerful magnet. And now that they knew the magnet was $15 million strong, they would be back. Sure enough, the next morning, the black SUV roared up the driveway again. This time, Chloe didn't wait for Chadwick to open her door. She stormed onto the porch, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. Chadwick followed close behind, looking like a vulture circling a dying animal. Why did you do it? Chloe screamed, her voice raw. Why did you let us struggle? Why did you let us get evicted? You have millions, Dad, millions, and you watch me cry over unpaid bills. You watched me stress about the wedding budget. Do you hate me? Is that it? Do you hate me that much? I sat in my chair, my hands resting on my knees. I didn't hate her. I loved her enough to let her fail, which is the hardest kind of love there is. But she wasn't ready to hear that. She was hurting and she was looking for a villain. I didn't do it to hurt you, Chloe, I said calmly. I did it to protect you. Protect me? She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. By lying to me? By pretending to be poor? How does that protect me? By keeping him away from the money, I said, pointing a finger at Chadwick. Chadwick stepped forward, his chest puffed out. Don't you dare blame this on me. You are the liar here, Arthur. You are the one sitting on a fortune while your daughter starves. You are a miser. A selfish old miser. I stood up. I reached under my chair and pulled out a thick manila folder. I had compiled it over the last 6 months with the help of a discreet investigator. It was heavy. It thudded when I dropped it onto the small wooden table between us. I'm not the one starving her, Chadwick, I said. You are. Chadwick looked at the folder. What is that? More lies. It's the truth, I said. Something you seem to be allergic to. I opened the folder. Papers spilled out. Bank statements, credit card bills, casino receipts, hotel invoices. Chloe, look at this, I commanded. Chloe hesitated. She looked at Chadwick, who was suddenly very still. Don't look at it, babe, Chadwick said quickly. It's fake. He forged it, just like he lied about being broke. Chloe looked at me, then at the papers. Curiosity won out. She picked up the top sheet. It was a credit card statement from 3 months ago. This is your card, Chadwick, she said, frowning. It says you spent $7,500 at the Velvet Rope. She looked up. That's a nightclub. You told me you were at a team-building retreat in Denver. Chadwick's face went white. That's not mine. He stole my identity. Or he photoshopped it. You know how tech is these days? He's trying to frame me. I handed her another paper. This is a promissory note, I said to a loan shark in Atlantic City. $250,000, Chadwick. You owe $250,000 in gambling debts. That's why you're desperate for my land. That's why you need cash now. Not for a house? Not for Chloe, to save your own skin. Chloe flipped through the pages. Her hands were shaking violently. There were receipts for jewelry she had never received. There were hotel bookings in the city for nights he said he was working late. There were transfers to offshore betting sites totaling more than her annual salary. Oh my God, she whispered. A ruby bracelet. $8,500. Who is Brandy? Chadwick snatched the paper from her hand. Nobody, it's a typo. It's a business expense. Chloe, listen to me. Look at him. Look at this old man. He hates me. He has hated me since day one. He went out and paid someone to make these fake documents to break us up. He wants to control you. He wants to buy you with his millions. But first he has to get rid of me. He turned to me, his eyes bulging. You are sick, Arthur. You are a sick, manipulative old man. You think you can buy your daughter back? You think these lies will work? They aren't lies, I said, and you know it. Chloe looked at Chadwick. She held up a photo from the pile. It was a picture of Chadwick entering a motel room with a woman who was definitely not Chloe. The timestamp was from 2 weeks before the wedding. Is this Photoshop too, Chadwick? She asked, her voice trembling. Chadwick stared at the photo. The evidence was irrefutable. The cornered animal panic set in. He couldn't deny it, so he attacked. He grabbed Chloe by the shoulders and shook her hard. You are being stupid, he shouted. Can't you see what he is doing? He is gaslighting you. He is the enemy here. He is the one with the secret fortune. I am your husband. You are supposed to trust me. I don't know, Chadwick, Chloe sobbed, trying to pull away. There is so much. The dates match. The money. Shut up, Chadwick screamed. He raised his hand, his face twisted in a snarl of pure aggression. He was going to hit her. He was going to strike my daughter to silence her doubts. The air in the room changed instantly. I moved. I didn't move like a 70-year-old man. I moved like the dock worker I used to be. I caught Chadwick's wrist in midair, inches from Chloe's face. My grip was iron. I squeezed, digging my thumb into the tender tendons. Chadwick gasped, his eyes snapping to mine. Let go, he grunted. I twisted his arm, forcing him to step back. Forcing him to release Chloe, I stepped between them, a wall of aged wool and fury. If you ever, I said, my voice low and vibrating with a deadly promise, raise your hand to my daughter again, you will not walk out of this house. Do you understand me? I shoved him backward. He stumbled, tripping over his own feet and crashing into the doorframe. He rubbed his wrist, looking at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. He had underestimated the old man again. Chloe was crying, clutching the damning papers to her chest. She looked at Chadwick with horror, as if seeing him for the first time. Get out, I told him. Get off my property. Chadwick straightened his jacket. He looked at Chloe, then at the papers, then at me. He regained a sliver of his bravado, the mask sliding back into place. Fine, he spat. I'm leaving. But this isn't over, old man. You think you have won because you have some money and some fake photos? But you don't know who you are dealing with. He pointed a finger at me. You are going to regret this. I am going to take everything. The land, the money, the girl. You are going to die alone in this shack, and I am going to piss on your grave. He turned to Chloe. Are you coming, or are you staying with the liar? Chloe didn't move. She just cried. Suit yourself, Chadwick sneered. You'll come crawling back when you realize he is just trying to control you. He stormed out to the SUV, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust and a silence that felt like a wound. I turned to my daughter. She was broken, but at least she was safe. For now, you're going to pay for this, Chadwick yelled out the window as he drove off. You're going to pay. Chadwick Vance was a man drowning in the deep end of a pool he had dug himself. The $250,000 debt to the loan sharks in Atlantic City wasn't just a number on a piece of paper anymore. It was a ticking bomb. After I kicked him off my property, he didn't go to a hotel. He couldn't. His credit cards were frozen blocks of useless plastic. He parked his leased SUV, which was likely days away from repossession, in the back lot of an all-night diner on the outskirts of town. He sat there in the dark, the engine idling, the air conditioning fighting, a losing battle against the sweat pouring down his face. He opened his laptop. It was a sleek machine company property. He had failed to return it after Blackwood fired him at the wedding. He stared at the screen, his reflection looking back at him, ghostly and terrified. He knew he had one card left to play in the corporate world. He knew where the bodies were buried. Or rather, he knew where the money was buried. Apex Distribution maintained a secure database known internally as the Platinum File. It was a list of Our top 400 clients, their private contact information, their shipping routes, and their contract renewal dates. It was data worth millions to a competitor. If Chadwick could download that file and sell it to our biggest rival across the state, he could pay off the loan sharks and still have enough left over to fight me for the land. He cracked his knuckles. He connected to the diner's free Wi-Fi. He launched the secure VPN client. His hands were shaking so badly he mistyped his password twice. On the third try, the connection bar turned green. Access granted. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. A twisted smile spread across his face. He thought we were stupid. He thought Blackwood had forgotten to revoke his credentials in the chaos of the wedding aftermath. He navigated through the server folders, his eyes scanning for the file. There it was. platinum_master_data.xlsx. He clicked download. I got you, he whispered to the empty car. I got you all. The progress bar appeared on his screen. 10%. 20%. He was already calculating the payout. He was already imagining the look on Blackwood's face when the company lost its biggest accounts. He was salivating at the thought of buying a lawyer to destroy me. 50%? At that exact moment, I was sitting on the porch of my house, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. A mug of herbal tea sat on the railing, steam rising into the cool air. The silence of the woods was absolute, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in Chadwick's life. I felt a vibration in the pocket of my work trousers. It wasn't a smartphone notification. It was a steady, rhythmic pulse from my old brick phone. I pulled it out. The small monochrome screen was glowing with a single line of text. Intrusion detected. User ID, Vance. I didn't panic. I didn't rush to a computer. I took a sip of my tea. Chadwick thought he had found a security oversight. He thought he had found a back door. What he didn't know was that I had built that back door myself 20 years ago. When I designed the architecture for the company's digital infrastructure, I built a honeypot. It was a trap designed specifically for disgruntled ex-employees who thought they could burn the house down on their way out. The file he was downloading wasn't the client list. It was a digital executable file disguised as a spreadsheet. It was a program I called The Reckoning. I looked at the phone. It gave me two options. One was to block the access. The other was to execute the countermeasure. I thought about the way he spoke to my daughter. I thought about the bowl he smashed. I thought about the disrespect he showed to the people who built this company. I pressed the button for option 2. Execute? In the parking lot of the diner, Chadwick's laptop screen flickered. The download bar hit 99% and stopped. Come on, he hissed, tapping the enter key. Come on, you piece of junk. The screen didn't finish the download. Instead, it turned a bright, angry crimson. A text box appeared in the center of the screen, black letters against the red background. Unauthorized access detected. Countermeasures initiated. Smile, you are on camera. Chadwick froze. The little green light next to his webcam turned on. Before he could cover it, the camera snapped a series of high-definition photos of his face, capturing the exact moment his arrogance turned to terror. Then the laptop went haywire. The cooling fan spun up to maximum speed, creating a high-pitched whine that sounded like a jet engine taking off. The hard drive began to overwrite itself, scrubbing every piece of data Chadwick had ever saved. His personal emails, his banking passwords, his contacts, his evidence for his fake lawsuit against me. It was all being eaten by the code I had written 2 decades ago. No! Chadwick screamed. He tried to force shut the laptop, but the screen wouldn't turn off. He held the power button down, but the machine ignored him. The speakers blasted a loud, oscillating siren noise, drawing the attention of everyone walking into the diner. Chadwick panicked. He threw the laptop onto the passenger seat as if it were burning hot. The screen finally went black, but the damage was done. The device was a brick, and the signal had already been sent. 5 minutes later, Chadwick's phone buzzed. It was an email notification. He checked it, his hands trembling. It was from the legal department of Apex Distribution. Subject, Notice of legal action. Mr. Vance, we have logged a verified attempt of corporate espionage originating from your personal device. We have photographic evidence and IP logs confirming your identity. We are filing immediate charges with the federal authorities for violation of the Economic Espionage Act. We are also suing you for $12 million in damages for attempted theft of trade secrets. Do not leave the jurisdiction. Chadwick dropped the phone. He screamed, a long guttural sound of pure frustration and fear. He punched the steering wheel. Tears of rage streamed down his face. He was trapped. He had tried to steal his way out of debt and had only succeeded in digging a hole so deep he could never climb out. He looked at the darkened screen of his phone. He was broke. He was facing federal prison. He had enemies on all sides. The loan sharks, the company, me. He needed a way out. He needed a nuclear option. His eyes narrowed as a new, dark thought entered his mind. He couldn't beat me with money. He couldn't beat me with the law. He couldn't beat me with business. But there was one thing he could use, one weakness he thought I had. My age. He picked up his phone again. He dialed Chloe's number. His voice changed instantly, shifting from the rage of a cornered animal to the smooth, manipulative tone of a concerned husband. "Chloe, baby, listen to me," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I just tried to log into my old work email to get some contacts to find a new job, and your dad blocked me. He hacked my computer. He is destroying my electronics remotely." He paused, letting the lie sink in. "Honey, I am really worried about him. This isn't normal behavior. The paranoia, the aggression, the hoarding of money while living in squalor. I spoke to a specialist friend of mine. These are classic signs of advanced dementia. He is a danger to himself and to others." He took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the final blow. "We can't let him live like this, Chloe. We have to take control for his own good. We need to get him help. We need to get him committed. And once we are his legal guardians, we can stop him from hurting us anymore." He hung up the phone and started the car. A cruel smile played on his lips. If he couldn't steal my money, he would simply take away my freedom. He would lock the old man away and take the keys to the kingdom. It was time for the final hand. The nursing home plot. The seed of doubt Chadwick planted in my daughter's mind bloomed into a poisonous tree within hours. He didn't give her time to think. He didn't give her time to come ask me for the truth. He isolated her in their cramped, temporary apartment and bombarded her with fear. I wasn't there to defend myself, but I know exactly what he said because Chloe told me later through tears of shame. He paced around her, waving his dead phone like a prop. He told her that I hadn't just blocked him from a computer. He told her I was raving. He claimed I had called him screaming about government spies and corporate assassins. He told her that the millions of dollars I claimed to have were just a symptom of extreme delusion, a common fantasy for seniors losing their grip on reality. He leaned in close, whispering his darkest lie yet. He told her I was stockpiling gasoline. He said I had threatened to burn the house down to keep the corporations away from my imaginary fortune. "Do you want to get that call, Chloe?" He asked her, his voice trembling with fake concern. "Do you want the police to call you at 3 in the morning to tell you your father burned to death because we didn't act? We are the only ones who can save him. He is sick, baby. He is so sick he doesn't even know who he is anymore. That is why he attacked me. That is why he humiliated us." It is the disease talking. Chloe broke. She was exhausted, broke, and terrified. She loved me, and Chadwick used that love as a weapon against me. She agreed to sign the papers. She agreed to the emergency and voluntary commitment. It happened at 2 in the morning. I was awake, sitting in the dark, monitoring the security feeds on my old phone. I saw the headlights cut through the trees long before they reached the house. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't a standard ambulance. It was an unmarked white van with tinted windows. Chadwick hadn't called the county services. He had hired a private patient transport service, the kind that asks no questions as long as the payment is made. I stood up and put on my jacket. I knew I couldn't fight them off physically. If I pulled a weapon or threw a punch, I would only prove Chadwick's narrative that I was violent and unstable. I had to play this hand differently. I reached into my safe and took out a small silver USB drive. I had prepared it days ago for a moment just like this. I slipped it into my palm, hiding it inside my sleeve. The front door burst open. No knock, no warning. 2 men in blue scrubs entered. They were large, their faces blank and professional. Chadwick walked in behind them, holding a clipboard. Chloe trailed at the back, her face buried in her hands, sobbing. "Mr. Finch," the first orderly said, stepping toward me. "We are here to take you to a safe place." I didn't move. I looked at Chadwick. "You are a coward, Chadwick. You can't win a fair fight, so you have to lock me away." Chadwick didn't look at me. He turned to Chloe and held out the clipboard and a pen. "Sign it, honey. The doctor is waiting. We have to do this now before he hurts himself." Chloe looked at me. Her eyes were wide with terror and sorrow. "Daddy, please. It's for your own good. You are not well. We just want to help you." "I am perfectly sane, Chloe," I said calmly. "And he is lying to you." "See," Chadwick shouted, pointing at me. "He is paranoid. He thinks everyone is lying." "Sign the paper, Chloe. Do it now." Chloe's hand trembled as she signed the involuntary commitment order. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded like a sentence being passed. As soon as the ink was dry, the orderlies moved. They didn't ask me to walk. They grabbed my arms. I stiffened, planting my feet. "I can walk," I said. "He is resisting," Chadwick yelled. "Sedate him." One of the men pulled a syringe from his pocket. It was already prepped. He didn't hesitate. He jabbed it into my shoulder through the wool of my jacket. I felt the sting, then the cold rush of the chemical hitting my bloodstream. "You didn't have to do that," I gritted out, my legs starting to feel heavy. Chadwick smiled. It was a smile of pure victory. He walked over to me as the drug began to pull me down. "It's better this way, Arthur," he whispered, so only I could hear. "You get a nice padded room. I get the power of attorney. I get the land. I get the money. And Chloe gets to think she saved her daddy. Everyone wins." My vision blurred. The room tilted. The orderlies began to drag me toward the door. My feet dragged on the floorboards. I fought the darkness closing in on my mind. I had one last thing to do, one last move to make before I disappeared into the system. Chloe was standing by the doorframe, crying, unable to look at me. I slumped, making myself dead weight, forcing the orderlies to adjust their grip. This brought me inches from her. I reached out with my right hand, the one holding the USB drive. I grabbed the edge of her cardigan. She flinched, looking down at me. She expected me to scream. She expected me to beg. I didn't. I used the last ounce of my dexterity to slip the silver drive into her open pocket. My fingers brushed against her hand. She froze, feeling the cold metal object slide in. I looked up at her. My tongue felt thick. The world was spinning into a gray fog, but I forced my eyes to focus on hers one last time. "Don't cry," I whispered, my voice slurring. "Watch it. Watch what I gave you. Then you can cry." Chloe frowned, her hand going to her pocket. She felt the drive. She looked at me, confusion warring with her grief. "Move him out," Chadwick barked. The orderlies hauled me through the door and into the night air. They threw me into the back of the van and strapped me to a gurney. The last thing I saw before the heavy metal doors slammed shut was Chadwick putting his arm around Chloe, comforting her for the crime he had just forced her to commit. The engine started. The van lurched forward. I closed my eyes, letting the sedative take me. I was going to a prison, but I had left the key behind. Chadwick thought he had buried me. He didn't realize he had just handed the shovel to the only person who could dig me out. I woke up to the smell of ammonia and stale urine. My head felt heavy, like it was stuffed with wet cotton, a lingering effect of the sedative they had forced into my veins. I tried to sit up, but my muscles were sluggish and unresponsive. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision. I was in a room that was barely larger than a closet. The walls were painted a depressing institutional beige. There was a single metal cot bolted to the floor, a thin mattress, and a toilet in the corner that lacked a seat. There were no windows. The only light came from a fluorescent strip buzzing angrily on the ceiling behind a wire cage. 30. This wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a care facility. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. It was a place where families sent their elderly problems to be forgotten. I dragged myself to the edge of the cot and placed my feet on the cold linoleum floor. I wasn't afraid. Fear is a reaction to the unknown, and I knew exactly where I was and why I was here. I was here because I had allowed it. I was here because it was the only way to get the evidence into the only hands that mattered. Miles away, in the living room of the house Chadwick had tried to condemn, my daughter was staring at the small silver object in her hand. The house was silent. Chadwick had dropped her off and left immediately to meet with his lawyer, eager to file the paperwork that would grant him power of attorney over my estate. He had left Chloe alone with her guilt. She sat on the sofa where I used to read the newspaper. She looked at the USB drive I had slipped into her pocket. Her fingers trembled. She remembered my last words. "Watch it, then you can cry." She reached for her laptop. It was an old machine, one I had bought her for college years ago. She plugged the drive into the side port. A folder popped up on the screen. It contained a single video file titled simply the_truth.av. She hesitated. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Part of her wanted to pull the drive out and throw it into the fireplace. Part of her wanted to believe the lie that Chadwick was her savior and I was the villain. But the doubt I had planted had deep roots. She moved the cursor and clicked play. The video player opened. The footage was from a hidden camera angle, high up and wide. It was the interior of Chadwick's SUV. The timestamp was from 3 days ago, the afternoon he had come to threaten me with the lawsuit. Chloe leaned in. On the screen, Chadwick was driving. He wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a woman Chloe didn't recognize. She was young, brunette, and laughing. She had her hand resting intimately on Chadwick's thigh. "So he really has millions?" the woman asked, her voice tinny through the laptop speakers. 15 million in land alone?" 31, Chadwick replied, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Plus whatever cash he's hoarding. The old fool has been sitting on a gold mine while I've been dodging calls from collectors. And what about the wife? The daughter? Do they know?" Chloe held her breath. "She knows now," Chadwick laughed. "But she's dumb. She's so desperate for affection, she believes anything I tell her. I told her the old man is crazy and she ate it up. She's weak. She's just like her father. Pathetic and soft." The woman in the video giggled. "So what happens when you get the money?" Chadwick took one hand off the wheel and squeezed the woman's leg. "Once I get the power of attorney and sell that land, I'm kicking Chloe to the curb. I'll give her a few grand to shut her up and file for divorce. She's annoying anyway. Always crying, always whining about her daddy. I'm done with her. We take the cash, we buy a place in Costa Rica, and we live like royalty." Chloe gasped. The air left her lungs. She watched as the Chadwick on the screen leaned over and kissed the woman, a long, passionate kiss while driving the car her father had paid for. "He's in a home by the end of the week," Chadwick bragged to his mistress. "And once he's locked up and medicated, nobody will ever listen to him again. He will rot in there and we will be spending his fortune." Chloe slammed the laptop shut. She couldn't watch anymore. She couldn't breathe. The scream that tore from her throat was raw and primal, a sound of pure agony. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the shattering of her entire reality. I had been right. I had been right about everything. The gambling, the cheating, the theft. She had betrayed the only man who had ever truly loved her for a man who called her dumb and weak. She curled into a ball on the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. She felt dirty. She felt used. She realized with a sickening clarity that she had signed the papers to imprison her own father based on the lies of a predator. 32. The front door opened. Chloe froze. She wiped her eyes frantically, but it was too late. Chadwick walked in. He was whistling. He held a bottle of champagne in one hand and a stack of legal documents in the other. He looked victorious. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. "Honey, I'm home," he called out cheerfully. "And guess what? The lawyer says we can expedite the property transfer. We're going to be rich by Friday." He stopped when he saw her. He saw the red eyes. He saw the open laptop on the coffee table. He saw the silver USB drive sticking out of the side. His smile vanished. The bottle of champagne lowered slowly to his side. The air in the room turned electric with tension. "What are you watching, Chloe?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. Chloe stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she stood. She looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see her husband. She saw a monster. "You are cheating on me," she whispered. Chadwick blinked. "Who told you that? Your crazy father?" "I saw it," she screamed, pointing at the computer. "I saw you with her. I heard you. You called me dumb. You said you were going to dump me as soon as you got the money. You are stealing my father's land." Chadwick looked at the laptop. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't try to make up a lie. He dropped the champagne bottle. It didn't break. It rolled across the rug with a dull thud. He dropped the papers. He lunged forward. He grabbed the laptop with both hands and raised it above his head. With a roar of rage, he brought it down onto the corner of the heavy wooden table. The screen shattered. Plastic and glass flew across the room. He smashed it again and again until the device was nothing but twisted metal and wires. He ripped the USB drive out of the port and crushed it under his heel, grinding it into the floorboards. "There," he panted, staring at the debris. "Now you haven't seen anything. It's your word against mine. And who is going to believe a hysterical woman whose father is in the loony bin?" 33. "You are insane," Chloe cried, backing away toward the kitchen. "I'm calling the police. I'm going to get my dad out." Chadwick moved faster than she expected. He grabbed her arm and spun her around. He shoved her toward the bedroom. "You aren't calling anyone," he snarled. "You are going to stay right here. You are going to sit in that room and shut your mouth until the sale goes through. If you try to leave, if you try to call anyone, I will tell the doctors you are just as crazy as your old man. I will have you committed right next to him." He threw her into the bedroom and slammed the door. Chloe heard the lock click. She pounded on the wood, screaming for him to let her out, but he just laughed. "Sit tight, wifey," he shouted through the door. "We are almost at the finish line." Back in my cell, the heavy steel door opened. A large orderly walked in. He held a cordless phone in his hand. He looked at me with dead eyes. "Call for you," he grunted. He held the phone to my ear. I couldn't move my arms fast enough to take it. "Hello," I rasped, my throat dry. "Hello, Arthur," Chadwick's voice chirped in my ear. "How was the vacation? Is the food good?" "You won't get away with this, Chadwick," I said. "I already have," he replied. "I am at the house. I have the deed and I have Chloe. She found your little movie, by the way. She didn't like it, but don't worry, I took care of her. She is locked in her room for her own safety, just like you." My hand clenched into a fist. "If you hurt her, what are you going to do, Arthur?" He interrupted. "You are locked in a box. You are powerless. You are nothing. I have the land. I have the girl, and you are going to rot in there until you die. Goodbye, old man." The line went dead. The orderly took the phone back and walked out, the lock engaging with a heavy clank behind him. I sat in the silence of my prison. Chadwick thought he had won. He thought the game was over. He didn't know that I wasn't trapped in there with him. He was trapped out there with me. I looked at the door handle. It was a simple pin-tumbler lock. I reached into the hem of my trousers and pulled out a thin, stiff piece of wire I had concealed days ago. It was time to check out. 34. I waited until the heavy footsteps of the orderly faded down the hallway before I moved. I pulled the piece of stiff wire from the hem of my trousers. It was a simple thing, a scrap I had scavenged anticipating a moment like this. But in the hands of a man, who had spent 40 years fixing machinery and solving logistical puzzles. It was a master key. I knelt by the door. The lock was a standard commercial-grade deadbolt, strong against force but weak against finesse. I inserted the wire, feeling for the tumblers. I closed my eyes. I didn't need to see. I needed to feel. I visualized the internal mechanism, the springs, the pins. 1 click. 2 clicks. I applied a slight torque with my thumb. The 3rd pin resisted, gritty and stubborn, but I coaxed it upward. The cylinder turned with a soft metallic groan that sounded like freedom. I pushed the door open just an inch. The hallway was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed with the sound of neglect. The orderly was sitting at a station about 20 feet away, his back to me, scrolling through his phone with his feet propped up on the desk. He was big, a wall of muscle, the kind of man hired for intimidation rather than care. I slipped out of the room, my socks silent on the cold linoleum. I didn't run. Running attracts attention. I walked with a predator's stalk, closing the distance before he even knew the air in the room had shifted. He must have sensed me at the last second. He spun his chair around, dropping his phone. "Hey," he shouted, starting to rise. "Get back in your room, old man." He reached for the taser on his belt. He was slow. He was confident. He saw gray hair and wrinkles and assumed I was frail. He didn't see the man who had built an empire with his bare hands. He didn't see the man who had loaded cargo ships in, freezing ports until his muscles turned to steel cable. I didn't stop. I stepped inside his reach as he lunged for me. He tried to grab my throat. I slapped his hand away and drove my fist into his solar plexus. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a short, piston-like strike fueled by 70 years of gravity and rage. The air left his lungs in a wet wheeze. He doubled over. I didn't give him time to recover. I grabbed the back of his neck with one hand and his belt with the other, using his own momentum to slam him face first into the desk. His head bounced off the laminate surface with a sickening thud. He slid to the floor, groaning, clutching his face. "Stay down," I growled, my breathing even and steady. 35. I grabbed his keys from his belt. I didn't look back. I walked down the corridor, my stride lengthening. I passed other rooms, hearing the soft cries of the people trapped inside, and I promised myself I would burn this place to the ground. Legally speaking, once I was done, I reached the end of the hall and found the heavy oak door marked administration. I didn't knock. I used the master key I had taken from the orderly and threw the door open. The office was plush, a stark contrast to the cells in the back. Persian rugs, mahogany furniture, the smell of expensive cigars. Sitting behind the desk was the director, a man named Dr. Albright. He was counting a stack of cash, likely the bribe money Chadwick had paid him. He jumped up, scattering the bills across the desk. "Who are you?" he demanded, his eyes wide. "How did you get out?" "Security." I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. "Sit down," I commanded. Dr. Albright looked at the phone on his desk. "Don't even think about it," I said, walking toward him. "By the time you dial, I will be across this desk. And unlike your orderly, I won't be gentle." He sat back down, his face pale. "Look, Mr. Finch, we can work this out. Your son-in-law, he paid for a premium package. We are just following protocol." "My son-in-law didn't pay for anything," I said, leaning over the desk. "He paid you with stolen money. But that is not your biggest problem right now. Your biggest problem is that you didn't do your due diligence. You didn't check who I was." "I know who you are," Albright stammered. "You are Arthur Finch, a retired laborer with dementia." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old brick phone. I placed it on the desk next to his pile of dirty money. "Look at the wall behind you," I said. 36. Albright turned. On the wall, amidst various diplomas and awards, was a large bronze plaque commemorating the founding donors of the facility. "Read the top name," I ordered. Albright squinted. "The Eleanor Finch Foundation." "Eleanor Finch was my wife," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room. "This facility exists because I wrote a check for $5 million 12 years ago to care for the elderly with dignity. I own the land this building sits on. I sit on the board of the trust that pays your salary. Albright turned back to me. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He looked at my old suit, then at my face, and the realization hit him like a freight train. He had imprisoned his own benefactor. He had taken a bribe to torture the man who owned the building. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Mr. Finch, sir, I didn't know." The paperwork said. "The paperwork was forged," I snapped. "And you are finished. You are going to prison, doctor, for kidnapping, for fraud, for elder abuse. And I'm going to personally ensure you never practice medicine again." I picked up his desk phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Miss Jones," I said when the line clicked open. "It's time. Execute the protocol and call the sheriff." "I'm at the nursing home." I looked at Albright. He was shaking, tears forming in his eyes. "Sir, please," he begged. "I have a family." "So do I said coldly. "And my family is currently being held hostage by a psychopath because—" "You helped him. Get up." I marched him out of the office and through the front lobby. The receptionist stared in shock as I shoved the director through the automatic glass doors. We stepped out into the cool night air. 37. The scene outside was a symphony of power. The gravel driveway was filled with vehicles, but they weren't police cars. Not yet. They were 3 black luxury sedans, their engines idling with a low, menacing purr. The Apex distribution logo was discreetly etched on the doors. Standing by the lead car was Ms. Jones, my chief legal counsel, a woman who could dismantle a corporation with a single clause. Behind her were 6 men in dark suits. They weren't just drivers. They were my personal security detail, men I had hired from elite units to protect my assets in volatile regions. Ms. Jones stepped forward. She didn't look at Albright. She looked at me. "Mr. Finch," she said, handing me a fresh tablet and a clean overcoat. "The sheriff is 5 minutes out? We have the warrants prepared." "Good," I said. I turned to Albright, who was staring at the fleet of cars with his jaw on his chest. "Wait here for the police," I told him. "If you move, my associates will detain you. And they are not as patient as I am." I walked to the lead sedan. The driver, a man named Robert, who had been with me for 20 years, opened the rear door. "Where to, sir?" Robert asked. I looked toward the horizon, toward the woods where my house stood, where my daughter was trapped, where Chadwick was celebrating a victory he hadn't earned. I adjusted my new overcoat. I felt the strength returning to my limbs. The old man was gone. The chairman was back. "Go to my house, Robert," I said, stepping into the leather interior. "We have to take out the trash." The air inside the house was thick with the smell of stale, sweat, and impending violence. Chadwick Vance had crossed the line from desperate to deranged. He paced the small living room, a serrated kitchen knife gripped tightly in his sweating hand. He had ripped the phone cord from the wall. He had locked the front door. He had trapped my daughter in the very sanctuary I had built to protect her. Chloe sat at the wooden dining table, her body trembling so violently the chair rattled against the floorboards. The quitclaim deed lay before her, smoothed out but stained with her tears. Chadwick slammed his hand down on the table, making her jump. 38. "Sign it," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Sign his name. You have his power of attorney now. You can sign for him. Do it." "I can't," Chloe sobbed, her hands covering her face. "It's illegal." "He didn't agree to this. You had him committed," Chadwick roared, leaning over her. "He is gone. He is never coming out. He is rotting in that cell, and he is going to die there. We are the only ones left. We need this money. The sharks are coming for me, Chloe. Do you understand? They will break my legs. They will hurt you." He grabbed a handful of her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at him. He brought the knife up, pressing the cold, jagged metal against the soft skin of her throat. A single drop of blood welled up under the blade. "Sign the paper," he hissed, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Sign it, or I swear to God I will cut you." I have nothing left to lose. I will kill you and tell the police your crazy father broke out and did it. They will believe me. Everyone believes me. Chloe whimpered, reaching for the pen with a shaking hand. She was going to do it. She was going to sign away her heritage to save her life. She touched the pen to the paper. At that moment, the world outside the house exploded with light. High-intensity beams cut through the thin curtains, flooding the room with a blinding white glare. The gravel driveway crunched under the weight of heavy, precision-engineered tires. It wasn't just one car. It was a fleet. Chadwick froze, the knife still pressed against Chloe's throat. "Who is that?" he whispered, squinting against the light. "Is it the police?" He dragged Chloe up from the chair, using her as a human shield, turning her toward the door. "Don't move," he warned her. "If they come in, you bleed." The front door didn't just open. It disintegrated. A single thunderous crash shook the foundations of the house as the lock, the frame, and the wood shattered inward. Splinters flew through the air like shrapnel. Two figures dressed in tactical black burst into the room. They moved with a speed and fluidity that the human eye struggled to follow. They weren't police. They were my personal extraction team, men who had cleared rooms in conflict zones before they ever put on a suit for apex distribution. 39. Chadwick tried to scream, tried to tighten his grip on the knife, but he was fighting gravity and professionals. The first guard struck Chadwick's wrist with a baton, a sickening crack echoing through the room. The knife clattered to the floor. The second guard swept Chadwick's legs, driving him into the hardwood floor, face first. Chloe screamed and scrambled backward, crashing into the wall. "Stay down," the guard barked, pressing a knee into the center of Chadwick's back. Chadwick howled in pain and confusion. "Who are you? What is happening?" Then silence fell over the room. The dust from the door settled. The guard stepped aside, creating a path. I stepped through the broken doorway. I was no longer wearing the moth-eaten wool jacket or the stained work trousers. I was wearing a bespoke suit, charcoal gray, cut to perfection. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. A silk tie was knotted precisely at my throat. I didn't walk with the stoop of an old man. I walked with the upright, imposing posture of a man who commands armies. I held a silver-handled cane, not for support, but as a symbol of authority. I stepped into the light of the living room. I looked at the broken bowl. I looked at my terrified daughter. I looked at the man pinned to the floor like an insect. "Hello, Chadwick," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and resonated with absolute power. Chadwick twisted his head, trying to see me. His eyes widened until they were almost perfectly round. He blinked, trying to reconcile the image of the ragged old man he had, thrown into a van with the Titan standing before him. "Arthur!" he gasped. "How?" "You were in the home. You are broke." I walked over to him. The sound of my expensive shoes on the wood was sharp and distinct. I stopped inches from his face. I looked down at him with cold indifference. "I am not Arthur," I said. "Arthur was a character, a test, and you failed." I signaled to the guards. They hauled Chadwick up to his knees, forcing him to look at me. He was shaking, sweat and snot running down his face. He looked at the suit. He looked at the guards. He looked at the line of luxury sedans visible through the shattered door. 40. "Who are you?" Chadwick screamed, his mind snapping under the strain of the reality shift. "You are a nobody. You are an unemployed loser." I leaned in close. I wanted him to hear every syllable. "I am the man who signs the checks of the CEO who fired you," I said. "I am the majority shareholder of the bank that holds your mortgage. I am the owner of the land you are kneeling on. And right now, I am the man who owns your life." Chadwick shook his head. No, that's impossible." "You are just a laborer." "I was a laborer 40 years ago," I corrected. "Now I am Apex Distribution." "And you, Chadwick, are a trespasser." "You are a kidnapper. You are a fraud." I looked at Chloe. She was staring at me, her mouth open, tears drying on her cheeks. She saw the suit. She saw the power. And for the first time, she saw her father not as a victim, but as a force of nature. "Daddy," she whispered. I turned back to Chadwick. "You wanted my money," I said. "You wanted my power. Well, here it is. This is what power looks like, son. It doesn't look like bullying a woman with a knife. It looks like ending a man's entire existence without raising your voice." I motioned to Ms. Jones, who stepped into the room holding a tablet. "Show him," I ordered. She held the screen in front of Chadwick's face. It showed a live feed of his secret storage unit being raided by the FBI. It showed his bank accounts being seized. It showed his face on a breaking news alert for corporate espionage. "You're finished, Chadwick," I said. "You have no money. You have no job. You have no wife. And as of this moment, you have no freedom. Take him out of my house," I commanded the guards, "and make sure he hits every step on the way down." As they dragged him screaming out the door, I turned to my daughter. I held out my hand. She looked at it, then at me. She rushed forward and buried her face in my chest, sobbing. I held her tight, the expensive fabric of my suit absorbing her tears. The war was over, but the cleanup was just beginning. 41. Chadwick Sterling was a cockroach. You could step on him, you could spray him, but he always found a way to skitter back into the darkness. I thought the FBI raid on his digital life would be the end of it, but I underestimated the blindness of a mother's love. His parents, decent people who had no idea their son was a monster, mortgaged their retirement home to post his bail. He was out within 48 hours. And instead of running, instead of hiding, he did the only thing a narcissist knows how to do. He sought the spotlight. I turned on the television in my living room. Every channel was broadcasting the same breaking news alert. There he was. Chadwick sat in a studio chair looking gaunt and bruised, wearing a cheap suit that was clearly borrowed. He was crying. It was a masterful performance. "My father-in-law is not who he says he is," Chadwick sobbed to the interviewer, a woman known for her sympathy pieces. "He claims to be a businessman, but he is a criminal mastermind. He has connections to the underworld. He kidnapped my wife. He is holding her hostage in that house right now. Those men in black suits aren't security. They are his hit squad." The interviewer leaned in, her face a mask of concern. "And the charges against you, Chadwick? The corporate espionage?" "Fabricated," Chadwick insisted, wiping a tear. "He hacked my computer. He planted the evidence. He has billions of dollars. He can buy the police. He can buy the judges. I am just a regular guy who tried to protect his wife, and now he is trying to destroy me. Please, if anyone is listening, save Chloe. Save my wife." The public ate it up. Social media exploded. Within an hour, there were hashtags trending: "Justice for Chadwick, free Chloe." A crowd began to gather at the gate of my property. They held signs. They shouted threats. They called me a monster. They didn't see a father protecting his daughter. They saw a rich villain crushing a poor boy. I turned off the TV. I looked at Chloe. She was sitting in the corner, shaking her head in disbelief. "He is good," she whispered. "He is so good at lying. He is desperate," I corrected. "And desperation makes men careless." I picked up my phone. "Miss Jones," I said, "set up the stage. We are going live in 30 minutes. I walked out onto the porch. The crowd at the gate was growing. News vans were pulling up, their satellite dishes extending like hungry necks. I didn't hide. I didn't retreat. I signaled to my security team. They opened the main gate. "Let them in," I ordered. The reporters rushed up the driveway, cameras rolling, microphones extended. They expected a confrontation. They expected a fortress. What they found was a 70-year-old man standing on the porch of a humble house, holding his daughter's hand. Behind me, my team had set up a massive LED screen. It looked out of place against the weathered wood of the house, a monolith of technology in the wilderness. "Mr. Finch," a reporter shouted, "is it true you are holding your daughter hostage?" I didn't answer. I simply pointed to the screen. The image flickered to life. It wasn't a pre-recorded video. It was a live feed. The timestamp in the corner marked the seconds ticking by in real time. The location was a nondescript warehouse in the industrial district, a property Chadwick had rented under a shell company 2 years ago. Everyone watched. The reporters fell silent. On the screen, heavily armed federal agents were cutting through a metal door with a blowtorch. Sparks flew. The door fell inward with a crash. The agents stormed inside, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The camera followed them. It swept across rows of metal shelving. But there were no legitimate goods on those shelves. There were stacks of counterfeit currency drying on racks. There were bags of white powder that tested positive for synthetic opioids. There were boxes of stolen electronics. I stepped up to the microphone my team had placed on the stairs. "Chadwick Vance claims I am a criminal," I said, my voice booming across the yard. "He claims I planted evidence. But what you are seeing right now is a federal raid on a warehouse leased in his name, paid for with his accounts and accessed with his biometric key." The screen split. On one side was the raid. On the other was a document. "This is the lease agreement," I continued, "signed by Chadwick Vance, and this is the ledger we recovered from his encrypted cloud server. It details every transaction, every drug deal, every laundered dollar. He wasn't selling logistics services. He was using my company's shipping containers to move contraband." Chloe stepped up beside me. She looked into the cameras. Her voice was shaky but clear. "My husband isn't a victim," she said. "He is a predator. And my father didn't kidnap me, he saved me." Miles away, in the living room of his parents' modest house, Chadwick Vance sat frozen. The remote control slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He watched the screen. He watched the raid. He watched his entire house of cards ignite and burn to ash in high definition. He saw the reporters turning to their cameras, their faces changing from sympathy to shock. He heard the anchor on the news channel interrupt the broadcast. "Breaking news," the anchor said. "The FBI has just issued a nationwide manhunt for Chadwick Vance. He is considered armed and dangerous. If you see this man, do not approach. Call 911 immediately." Chadwick scrambled backward, knocking over his mother's coffee table. His parents stared at him, horror dawning in their eyes. They had mortgaged their home for a drug dealer. "I have to go," Chadwick stammered. "I have to leave." He grabbed his car keys and ran out the back door. He jumped into his mother's old sedan. He turned the key. The engine sputtered. He looked at the house. He heard sirens in the distance. They were coming, not just the police. The loan sharks would see this too. Everyone was coming for him. He slammed his foot on the gas, screeching out of the driveway, a man running a race he had already lost. He was no longer a husband. He was no longer a victim. He was prey. Chadwick Vance drove his mother's rusted sedan like a man possessed. He ran 3 red lights and sideswiped a parked delivery truck. But he didn't stop. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, a constant reminder that his world had shrunk to the size of a prison cell. His phone sat in the cup holder, vibrating with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Probably the press, probably the police, probably the men who wanted to break his legs. He needed a way out, he needed cash, he needed a plane ticket. His mind raced through his list of contacts, but everyone had abandoned him. His friends had blocked his number. His parents were broke because of his bail. There was only one person left. One person who might help him, not out of love, but out of fear. He dialed Blackwood. The phone rang once, twice. Preston gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "Pick up, you coward." "Pick up," Blackwood answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, Chadwick." Chadwick let out a sob of relief. "Blackwood, listen to me. I know you fired me. I know you hate me. But you have to help me. I have copies of the internal emails. I have the offshore shipping manifest. If I go down, I am taking the company with me. I will leak everything to the IRS. I will tell them Apex Distribution is a fraud." He was bluffing. He had nothing. His laptop was fried and his cloud access was revoked. But desperation makes men believe their own lies. "I need $100,000. Chadwick shouted, his voice cracking. "Cash, and I need a boat. Get me out of the country and you never hear from me again." There was a pause on the line, then a click. The sound quality changed. "You are on speaker, Chadwick." A deep, familiar voice rumbled. Chadwick froze. He knew that voice. It was the voice of the man who had dismantled his life piece by piece. "Arthur," Chadwick whispered. "It is Mr. Finch to you," Reginald corrected. "And you have nothing, Chadwick. The files you think you have were dummy logs I created to catch thieves like you. Go ahead, call the IRS. They are already looking for you." Chadwick slammed his hand against the dashboard. "You ruined me!" "You took my wife. You took my life. You took your own life when you decided to become a criminal," I said calmly. But I am feeling generous today. I will give you one last chance." Chadwick's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "I will give you a head start," I said. "I know where you are. I'm tracking your phone. The police are closing in on the north side, but the south bridge is clear." Chadwick looked at the GPS. He was 10 minutes from the south bridge. "If you can make it to the old shipyard in 5 minutes, there is a container ship leaving for Belize." I said, I have a contact there. "If you are on that dock in 5 minutes, you might just disappear. Why would you help me?" Chadwick asked, suspicious but desperate. "Because I want you gone," I replied. "I want you far away from my daughter." 5 minutes, Chadwick. The clock starts now." The line went dead. Chadwick didn't think. He didn't question why his nemesis would offer him a lifeline. He just floored the gas pedal. The old sedan groaned in protest, but surged forward. He weaved through traffic, cutting off cars, driving on the shoulder. He saw the shipyard in the distance. The cranes rising like steel giants against the night sky. He checked the time. 3 minutes. He could make it. He was going to escape. He was going to survive, and one day he would come back for revenge. He crashed through the chain-link gate of the shipyard, tires screeching on the pavement. He drifted around a stack of shipping containers and screeched to a halt at the designated dock. He jumped out of the car, his eyes scanning the water for the ship. There was no ship. The dock was empty. The water was black and still. There was no captain waiting to whisk him away to a tropical paradise. There was only the cold wind coming off the harbor and the smell of salt and rust. Chadwick spun around, realizing too late that he had been led into a trap. But it wasn't the police. It wasn't me. Parked in the shadows of a container stack was a matte black luxury sedan. The headlights flicked on. Blinding Chadwick, 2 men stepped out. They weren't wearing uniforms. They wore expensive leather jackets and moved with the casual confidence of violence. One of them was holding a tire iron. Chadwick knew them. He knew them from the back rooms of the casinos. They were the collection. Agents for the loan sharks he owed $250,000 to. Well, the man with the tire iron said, smiling. "Look who decided to show up. We got a tip you might be coming here." Chadwick backed away, his hands raising in surrender. No, please." "I can pay. I just need time." "You are out of time, Chadwick," the man said, slapping the iron against his palm. "You have been dodging us for months, and now we see on the news you were trying to leave town. That is bad for business." "Arthur set me up," Chadwick screamed. "He sent me here." The man shrugged. "We don't know who Arthur is. We just got an anonymous text with a location, and here you are." Chadwick turned to run, but he was slow and tired. The second man tackled him before he could reach the car. He hit the concrete hard, the breath leaving his lungs. He rolled over, trying to crawl away, but the man with the tire iron was already standing over him. "This is going to hurt," the man said simply. The first blow broke his kneecap. Chadwick screamed, a sound that echoed across the empty shipyard. The second blow took the air from his ribs. He curled into a ball, trying to protect his head, sobbing, begging for mercy. But there was no mercy in the underworld. He had borrowed money he couldn't pay, and now he was paying with his flesh. He didn't know how long it lasted. It felt like hours. It was probably only minutes. He lay in a pool of his own blood, his body broken, his expensive dreams reduced to a pulp. He looked up at the sky, his vision blurring. He thought he was going to die. Then he saw the flashing lights. Red and blue strobes bounced off the shipping containers. Sirens wailed, drawing closer. The thugs heard them too. They looked at each other. "Cops," the man with the iron said. "Let's go." They dropped the iron and ran, disappearing into the shadows of the shipyard. They left Chadwick lying on the cold concrete, broken and alone. Chadwick watched the police cruisers skid onto the dock. Officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting commands. "Freeze, show me your hands." Chadwick couldn't show his hands. One of his arms was shattered, but he tried. He tried to lift his head. He looked at the officers not with fear, but with absolute gratitude. "Help me," he wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. The officers approached cautiously. They saw the condition he was in. They lowered their weapons slightly, but kept them trained on him. "Chadwick Vance, you are under arrest," one officer announced, moving in to cuff him. Chadwick started to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound. He was going to prison. He was going to lose his freedom. But prison had walls. Prison had guards. Prison was safe from the men with the tire irons. 48. "Thank you," he whispered as the officer snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists. "Thank you. Please take me. Take me away. Lock me up. Just don't let them come back." They dragged him to the squad car. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. His limp body was loaded into the back seat. As the car drove away, Chadwick looked out the window. High up on a crane overlooking the dock, he thought he saw a silhouette. A man in a suit watching. A man with a cane. "Arthur," he thought. "You won?" He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, terrified of what awaited him when he woke up, but grateful that for tonight the beating was over. He had wanted a life of luxury. Instead, he had earned a life of survival, and he knew deep down that he deserved every second of it. The smell of antiseptic in the private hospital room was sharp and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the summer afternoon outside the window. Chloe lay in the bed looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen shut from days of crying. She was recovering from severe dehydration and nervous exhaustion, the physical toll of having her life dismantled in front of the entire world. I sat in the chair next to her bed, a paring knife in my hand, carefully peeling a green apple in one long continuous strip. The rhythmic sound of the blade against the fruit was the only noise in the room. I didn't speak. I didn't lecture. I just sat there, being the father she had forgotten I could be. Chloe shifted, wincing as she pulled herself up. She looked at me, then quickly looked away, staring at her hands resting on the blanket. Her shame was a physical weight in the room, heavy and suffocating. "You should hate me," she whispered, her voice raspy. I sliced a piece of apple and offered it to her. She shook her head. "I don't hate you, Chloe," I said softly. "I signed the papers, Dad," she choked out, tears leaking from her eyes. "I signed the papers to lock you away. I let them drag you out of your own home. I chose him. I chose a monster because he bought me nice things and told me I was pretty. I am so stupid. I am so sorry." She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking with sobs. It was the apology I had been waiting for, but it brought me no joy. Seeing my daughter broken wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy I had failed to prevent. "You are not stupid, Chloe," I said, placing the knife on the table. "You were blinded. Love does that. It puts a filter over the world. You saw what you wanted to see. You wanted a fairy tale. And Chadwick was a very good storyteller. But you knew," she cried. "You knew the whole time. Why didn't you stop me sooner? Why did you let it go this far?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Because you wouldn't have listened. If I had told you Chadwick was a thief 6 months ago, would you have believed me? Or would you have called me a jealous old man? If I had bailed you out every time you hit a wall, would you have learned to climb it? You had to see his true face, Chloe, and unfortunately, monsters only show their true faces when they think they have won." Chloe looked at me, her eyes searching mine for an answer to the question that had been haunting her since the wedding. "Why did you hide it, Dad?" she asked. "The money? The company? Why did you live like that?" "If I had known you were a billionaire, none of this would have happened. That is exactly why I hid it," I replied firmly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "When your mother died, I realized something terrifying. I realized that I could buy anything in the world, but I couldn't buy character. I couldn't buy loyalty, and I certainly couldn't buy love. I watched my friends, other wealthy men, raised children who became spoiled, entitled brats. They married people who loved their bank accounts, not their hearts. I didn't want that for you. I turned back to her. I wanted you to be loved for who you are, Chloe, not for being the heiress to Apex Distribution. If I had flashed my money, Chadwick would have still married you. In fact, he would have married you faster. He would have been the perfect son-in-law. He would have smiled and nodded and waited patiently for me to die so he could inherit the empire. You never would have known he was a snake until it was too late. By hiding who I was, I forced him to show who he was. He didn't think you had a safety net, so he treated you like you were disposable. If that is how you measure a man, Chloe, you don't. Look at how he treats a CEO. You look at how he treats a person who can do absolutely nothing for him. Chloe absorbed my words. The realization washed over her. The perceived poverty had been a filter, a test that Chadwick had failed spectacularly. He never loved me, she whispered, the truth finally settling in her heart. He just wanted a way in? And when he thought the door was closed, he tried to break it down. I walked back to the bed and took her hand. It was cold, but she squeezed mine back. He loved what you could give him, I said. But that is over now. He is gone. He is in a cage where he belongs, and you are still here. You are safe. Chloe looked down at our joined hands. I don't know what to do now, Dad. I have nothing. I lost the apartment. I lost my job because of the scandal. I am 28 years old, and I have nothing to show for it but a criminal record by association and a broken heart. You have something very valuable, I corrected. You have a clean slate. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a small velvet pouch. Chloe flinched, perhaps expecting jewelry, perhaps expecting another lesson. I opened the pouch and tipped the contents into her palm. It was a single brass key. It is not a mansion, I said. And it is not a handout. It is an apartment in Chicago. It is small. It is a third-floor walk-up, but it is in a good neighborhood and the rent is paid for 1 year. Chloe looked at the key, confusion wrinkling her brow. You are sending me away. I am sending you to find yourself, I said. In this town, you will always be the girl who married the con artist. You will always be the billionaire's daughter. In Chicago, you are just Chloe. No one knows you. No one cares about your father. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out a business card. This is the number of a friend of mine who runs a community art center in Lincoln Park. I know you always loved sculpting before Chadwick told you it was a hobby for amateurs. She has an opening for a gallery assistant. It pays a basic wage. You will have to budget. You will have to take the bus. You will have to work hard. But it will be your work, your life. Chloe closed her hand around the key. She looked at me, tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of relief. You aren't going to give me millions, she asked, a small sad smile touching her lips. I smiled back. I will give you the same thing I gave Chadwick, independence, but unlike him, I think you know what to do with it. The money will be there, Chloe, when I am gone or when you have proven you don't need it. Until then, go live. Go make mistakes that are your own. Go find a man who loves you when you are broke. She pulled me into a hug, burying her face in my shoulder. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for saving me. I kissed the top of her head. I didn't save you, Chloe. I just opened the cage. You have to fly. I left her there, clutching the key to her future. I walked out of the hospital feeling lighter than I had in years. My daughter was safe. She was hurt, yes, but she was free. The hard part was over. Now there was only one thing left to do. One final loose end to tie up before I could truly retire again. I walked to the waiting sedan. Take me to the state penitentiary, Robert, I said. I have a visitation appointment. The heavy steel door of the maximum security visitation room slid, shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. It had been exactly 1 year since the night at the hotel, 365 days since Chadwick Vance had tried to destroy my life. The air inside the prison smelled of industrial cleaner and despair, a scent that clung to the clothes of everyone who entered. I sat on the hard plastic stool on the free side of the plexiglass barrier. I adjusted my cufflinks, the platinum catching the harsh fluorescent light. I waited. When the guards brought him in, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who shuffled toward the glass wasn't the arrogant, chest-puffing executive in an ivory tuxedo. He was a ghost. His head was shaved, revealing a scalp scarred from fights he had undoubtedly lost. His skin was sallow, the color of old parchment, and he had lost at least 40 pounds. The orange jumpsuit hung off his frame like a sack. He sat down slowly, wincing as if his body was a map of bruises. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at his hands, which were calloused and shaking. He picked up the black receiver. I did the same. "Hello, Chadwick," I said. He looked up then. His eyes were dull, stripped of the fire that had once fueled his greed. But when he saw my suit, the bespoke tailoring, the watch on my wrist, a spark of the old hatred flickered to life. "You came," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "I told you I would," I replied. He let out a dry, hacking laugh. "You came to gloat? You came to see the animal in the cage? Does it make you feel big, Arthur? Does it make you feel like a man to see me like this?" I looked at him with no emotion. I didn't feel big. I didn't feel small. I felt nothing. He was just a ledger entry that had been closed out, a bad investment written off. "I didn't come to gloat, Chadwick," I said quietly. "I came to see if you had learned anything." "Learned anything?" He spat, leaning closer to the glass. "I learned that rich people can buy their way out of anything. I learned that the system is rigged. You set me up. You baited me." "You set yourself up?" I corrected. "You dug the hole, Chadwick. I just handed you the shovel. You had a good job. You had a beautiful wife who loved you. You had a future. But it wasn't enough. You wanted what I had without earning it." He slammed his hand against the partition. It made a dull thud. "I deserved it," he hissed. "I worked hard. I was the best salesman you had, and you were hoarding millions in the dirt." "Speaking of dirt, tell me, Arthur, how is the land? Did you sell it? Did you get your 15 million? Are you enjoying spending my money?" I leaned back, crossing my legs. This was the moment. This was the final nail. "I didn't sell the land, Chadwick." He blinked, confused. "What?" "I didn't sell it," I repeated. "And I didn't keep it." His brow furrowed. "Then what did you do with it?" "It is prime real estate." "You said it yourself?" "I donated it," I said. Chadwick went still. He stopped breathing. "Donated it," he whispered. "Every acre," I continued. "I transferred the deed 6 months ago. The house was dismantled last week. Construction has already started." "Construction on what?" he whispered, a look of horror dawning on his face. "The Eleanor Finch Center for Youth," I said. "It will be the largest youth shelter and educational support facility in the state. It will house 200 children who have nowhere else to go. It will give them education, food, and a chance at a life you tried to throw away." "No," Chadwick gasped. "No, you threw away 15 million on street kids." "You are lying. You are lying to hurt me." I reached into my jacket pocket and held up a folded piece of paper against the glass. It was a photocopy of the dedication plaque. "Read it, Chadwick." He squinted. His eyes scanned the text. "Dedicated to the memory of Eleanor Finch, land donated by Arthur Finch, valued at $15.2 million." He dropped the phone. It swung by its metal cord, banging against the wall. He stared at me, his mouth open in a silent scream of agony. To a man like Chadwick, losing money was bad. But knowing that money had been given away, burned on charity, wasted on people who couldn't pay it back, that was torture. It broke his brain. He couldn't comprehend a world where character mattered more than cash. He scrambled to pick up the phone, his hands shaking violently. "You are crazy," he screamed into the receiver. "You are insane. That money could have saved me. That money could have bought me a new life. You gave it to trash." "Those children are not trash," I said, my voice turning hard. "They are the future. You are the trash, Chadwick. You are the waste. You thought money would save you. You thought if you had enough zeros in your bank account, you would be a king. But you forgot the most important rule of business and of life. I leaned in, my eyes locking with his terrified stare. Your net worth is not your self-worth. You're in here because you are morally bankrupt, and no amount of money can bail you out of that. I hung up the phone. Chadwick started screaming. He slammed his fists against the glass. He cursed me. He cursed Chloe. He cursed the world. The guards moved in, grabbing him by the shoulders. They dragged him away, his heels dragging on the floor, his screams fading as they hauled him back to his cell. I watched him go. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply stood up, buttoned my jacket, and turned my back on the man who had tried to break my family. He was gone. He was a memory. I walked out of the visitation room and through the series of checkpoints. The heavy metal doors buzzed and clicked open one by one, releasing me back into the world. I stepped out of the prison entrance and into the blinding afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted clean. Waiting at the curb was the black sedan. Blackwood was standing by the rear door, checking his watch. He looked up as I approached, a small smile playing on his lips. "How was the meeting, sir?" Blackwood asked, opening the door for me. "Productive," I said. "The account is closed." Blackwood nodded. "Good, the board is waiting. Mr. Finch, the merger with the Asian shipping conglomerate is on the table, and they won't sign without your approval." I looked back at the prison one last time. It was a gray, ugly building, a monument to bad choices. I thought about the house in the woods. I thought about Chloe in Chicago, sculpting her first major piece. I thought about the youth center rising from the dirt. I turned away and stepped into the car. The leather seat was cool and comfortable. "Let's go, Blackwood," I said. "We have work to do." The car pulled away, gliding silently down the highway. I took out my phone, the new smartphone Chloe had insisted I buy so we could video chat. I opened the calendar. I had a board meeting at 2, a charity gala at 6, and a video call with my daughter at 9. I was Arthur Finch, I was 70 years old, and I was just getting started. In the end, this wasn't just about saving my daughter from a bad marriage. It was about saving her from a life of superficiality. I learned that you can give your children everything, but if you don't teach them to value character over currency, you have given them nothing. Chadwick thought power was about intimidation and luxury. He learned too late that true power is quiet. It is the discipline to stand your ground when the world underestimates you. Don't let the noise of status blind you to the quiet signal of integrity. Money comes and goes, but your name is the only thing that stays with you until the end. Keep it clean. If you agree that respect must be earned and not bought, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers here on Winds of Thought.